Hello and welcome to Always Bored, Never Boring. I don't often make New Year's resolutions. My life is so chaotic and there always seems to be something demanding my time, so any promise I make will invariably be broken. However, at the beginning of 2025, I did say to myself that one thing I wanted to do this year was wrap up some long outstanding painting projects. I have numerous games that I have started to paint and then not been able to finish. In particular, there is Space Crusade, the Heroes for Dungeon Quest, and most pressing of all, Advanced Heroquest. Advanced Heroquest is a long-term project. I am constantly purchasing new Oldhammer miniatures for it, and it will be a long time before there is paint on all of those. However, at the very least, I wanted to make sure I had all of the miniatures from the core set painted, and that means it's time to paint 12 men-at-arms. Now, I suspect these miniatures fall into the realms of Marmite. The stiff posing without any sense of dynamic motion may not be appealing to some people. But I love these guys. The posing makes them look like they are standing on guard, which is pretty much all the men-at-arms do, as they aren't heroes and won't venture anywhere a hero hasn't already explored. And there is something very quaint and pleasing in their rigid stance. They have a no-nonsense style with stern, almost nervous expressions that really sell their standing as low-paid meatbags who are very aware they are in a world of trouble. They also work really well on the cramped Advanced Heroquest boards, no risk of getting tangled up with anyone else. Prepping them was fairly straightforward. I filed down the most prominent mould lines. I'm not the most particular when it comes to that sort of thing, but I did a once over on the arms and heads. Then I glued them into round bases with plastic glue and used some green stuff to fill any gaps. I sanded the tops of the tabs as flat as possible because when I paint the bases I won't be using textured paint, so it's a good idea to disguise the tabs if I can. You will notice most of my men-at-arms have their shields attached. If they were detached I would have kept them detached while painting, but I'm not going to risk removing the ones that have already been glued on. When miniatures have been super glued, sometimes you can pop them in the freezer to weaken the glue and then separate the parts. But some of these shields are properly welded on and it's not worth the risk. I will just work around them as best I can. The final thing I did before starting the painting process was gluing magnets underneath the bases. I store all of my painted miniatures in crates lined with rubber steel, so every miniature needs a magnet to secure it in place. To provide a good foundation to work from, I started by spray painting the miniatures with Citadel Chaos Black, and with all of the boring prep done, I was ready to begin. For these miniatures I have decided to go with a very simple colour scheme, mainly brown and grey. However, there are 12 miniatures in total, so I thought I would paint them in groups of 3, with each group having a different coloured tunic. That way, during a game I can allocate a colour of men-at-arms to each hero. I'm thinking blue for the warrior, purple for the wizard, red for the dwarf, and green for the elf. Also, I am going to be batch painting these in sets of 6. Batch painting gets things done quickly, but it may be worth painting a single miniature first to make sure you are happy with the end result before you start a factory line. In my usual way, I am beginning by painting the faces. I could do lots of different skin tones, but I honestly cannot be bothered for cannon fodder like this. I just want to get them table ready quickly, so I am going to use Cadian flesh across the whole lot. I'm thinning the paint slightly and I will apply 2 coats. No need to be tidy at this point, I just need to make sure I get smooth, even coverage. Then when that's dry, I am going to use some Reichland Flesh Shade to wash the faces and bring out all the details on those grumpy expressions. You can experiment with different shades if you like to get different complexions. Once the shade is dry, it's back to Cadian Flesh Tone to do highlights. I am going to thin the paint with Lamian Medium. If you don't have any medium, use water, but take extra care. If you use water to thin the paint, you will find the paint gets looser and you may end up with some running into recesses where you don't want it. When using Lamian Medium, you change the opacity of the paint without changing the consistency, making it easier to control the application. The eyes on these men-at-arms are small and right up under the helmets. I'll decide if I'm going to paint those later. For now, I am going to move on to the leather jerkins. For these, I am using an old favourite, the always reliable Xandri Dust. This is a nice light brown colour and I use so much of it, along with Steel Legion Drab. I am going to thin it just a touch and apply 2 coats over the leather armour, and I will bring it down over the tunics just to make sure I have good coverage over the edges of the armour. I don't want to miss any spots. Of course, I will need to do some shading, but not yet. First, I'm going to apply my other base colours, starting with the hero-specific colours for the tunics. For our example here, I'm going to use Evil Sun Scarlet, which is a really bright red, and I will apply 2 coats of this to the hem of the tunic and the sleeves. Later on I will also be putting some of this on the shield. Next I am switching to Steel Legion Drab. As before, I am thinning it slightly so I can apply smooth layers, and I am applying this to the leggings and the sleeves. I do find when painting adventurers for fantasy games, I often come back to the same few colours: Steel Legion Drab, Xandri Dust, Dawnstone and Leadbelcher. I think I just have a very specific idea in my head of what the grimy, dull world of an adventurer looks like. And sure enough, next I am going to switch to Dawnstone. It's a mid-grey that looks good for leather items like belts and boots, which is exactly what I am going to use it for: the belts, the boots and the gloves. Same process here, I've slightly thinned the paint and I am applying 2 coats. Next I need a deep rich brown. I am using Mournfang brown. I'm going to use this for any weapons and the knife sheaths, but most importantly I'm applying it to the large shields. I imagine these shields as being just painted wood, so I'm going to put down a solid base coat of brown and then I will layer up some chipped paint on top. The aim is to make the shields look well worn. These aren't rich adventurers after all. To achieve the chipped paint look, I'm going back to my Evil Sun's red because I want the shields to match the tunics. I'm going to haphazardly apply this to the face of the shield, making sure it goes into the recesses around the embossed design, but leaving the edges of the shield and a few patches brown. I don't want this to look smooth or even. After that, I'm going to use Marrow White from the P3 range, and I'm going to put a very small amount on a small dry brush and try to put it on the raised shield emblem using a flicky motion to try to make it look scratched and dinged. We are nearly ready to add some shading, but not before we have done the metallics. I saved these for last to minimise the number of times I had to change my water, because you should always change your water after using metallic paint to prevent any little metallic flecks from tainting your other colours. I am using Leadbelcher, thinned slightly with some Lamian medium, and this will go on the helmets, belt buckles, weapons, and the studs on the leather jerkins. Dotting in the studs is a pain. You can skip it, but it does make the miniatures look better. At this point our men-at-arms are fully painted except for the bases. You could use them just like this, but we want to use some liquid talent to do some recess shading and to bring out all of the detail. No surprise, for that I am using Agrax Earthshade. This is going to go over everything except for the faces that we have already shaded and anything metallic or grey. Then, when the Agrax is completely dry, we are going to grab the other liquid talent, Nuln Oil, and we are going to put that over all of the metals and greys. And again, this is another point in the process where you can stop. You will have something that looks much more natural and shaded, but there are a few more steps you can take. First, you can go back to each area of the miniature with the original base colour to layer up some highlights. I find this isn't always necessary on the metal, which looks good or dingy and beaten up, but for the grey gloves and boots, and particularly the coloured tunics, it's worth the extra few minutes of effort. Then there is the small matter, the very small matter, of the eyes. With these miniatures you can really get away with not painting them thanks to the overshadowing of the helmets. But, if you want to, I am using my Army Painter Psycho Brush to line in the eyes with some pallid witch flesh. You need to be slow and methodical here, brace the miniature on the table, take a deep breath. Then I'm going to switch to Abaddon Black and, still with my Psycho Brush, I am going to dot in the pupils. Finally, if the eyes look a bit too prominent, you can give them a quick wash with Reikland Flesh Shade to tone them down, and that is that. The final step is to paint the base. I do all my Advanced Heroquest bases in the same way, and I have already made a video about it which you will find linked in the video description below. So for this particular video, we are finished. And boy, it does feel good to complete a painting project, to have the Advanced Heroquest core set done and dusted. Only, I haven't got it done and dusted. Not quite. I still have some of the plastic Skaven to batch paint. I completely forgot I had only painted half of them. Ah well. At least I have already done the painting video for them. You will find that linked below as well. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, please consider pressing the like button. If you really like this video, please consider subscribing if you don't already do so. And hopefully, I will see you all again very soon. Bye bye everyone. Bye bye.